Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So, today I'm going to be bringing up a Wings of Fire topic that I just love learning more about. And that's the family structures of each tribe. They all tackle home life differently, and it's a really fascinating subject that I hope gets expanded upon even more. From loose systems like the Mudwings and their siblings essentially raising themselves, to even as dramatic as arranged marriages for Silkwings, Pyria and Pentala will definitely surprise you in this regard. But before I begin, a huge shout out to my patrons. Traveler95, Thistle, Noobto, Pyronuke, Avril, Pancake, Escarada, Adequin, Alex Cleaver, Shadow Hunter, That One Sea-Wing, Moonclaw, Isaac, Iris, and Minecraft Wiz 9. Thank you all so much for supporting me. Links to their social medias are in the description down below. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the video. The Mudwings are arguably the most different tribe when it comes to dragonet raising. There really is no concept of marriage, at least not in the kingdom's troops. Rather, every month there's a designated breeding night where Mudwings will partner up with a stranger if the village needs to have eggs. Neither parent plays any involvement in the raising of their dragonets. The mother simply just buries the batch in a bunkhouse, one that's warm and protected by mud. While they do occasionally check on their eggs to ensure they're still there and okay, nothing else is done. The dragonets inside hatch on their own, with the bigwings immediately taking on a leadership role. This is the first baby who breaks out of their egg, usually the biggest, and has the innate instinct to help their siblings hatch. That Mudwing bond between siblings stretches from the moment of birth to a dragon's death, and is the kind of loyalty they take very seriously. Inside troops, they raise each other and themselves, using only other Mudwings in the village to watch and learn from. They copy that behavior and use their natural-born skills to aid survival. Each sibling has some sort of designated role that fits their personality and abilities. This tribe even takes in orphaned dragons, also known as unsibs. Several have been recorded as forming their own troops as well, especially during times of war when loss is so common. This connection between Mudwing siblings is so strong that not a single one of their queens has ever been challenged by a sister for the throne. Next up are the Sea-Wings, whose family structure we actually don't know much about. It seems to just be formal or married pairings that raise dragonets in their own home, like what you see most commonly in parts of our worlds. There are caretakers for dragonets, which implies there's some sort of nursery or daycare even before or after school. This allows parents to go to work or complete projects without having to keep an eye on their little ones. I mean, imagine having to be sure your child doesn't accidentally just swim off into the literal depths of the ocean. Then there's the Rainwings, whose society is very different than any we know. Just like the Mudwings, these rainforest dragonets don't have set parents. Rather, everyone in the tribe acts as a guardian, teacher, or helper to the younglings. Most dragons don't even know who their relatives are, as breeding is pretty much random, and the identities of parents used to never be kept track of. Dragonets hatch inside of a special nest where all the eggs are held, and this sort of nursery is checked on every few days. Young Rainwings spend most of their time on designated pavilions with others around their age in order to socialize and learn necessary skills. Adults inform them about how to aim their venom, use camouflage, fly through trees, gather fruit, and much more. However, before Glory's rule, reigning dragonets were not taught how to read or write. Despite not everyone taking on a role in the tribe, some dragons end up training to be healers or master storytellers. The Rainwing system is experiencing some significant changes under Glory's rule. Not keeping track of eggs at all has been a big issue in the past, even if dragons didn't want to acknowledge it until she took the throne. it's time to move to the Nightwings, who used to be Pyria's most elusive tribe for centuries. These dragons had come through many phases, all of which have resulted in different family structures. While living on the volcano, dragons either remained in traditional married pairs, or one was left to raise the eggs by themselves, as if a husband or wife was busy working on projects for the tribe, or passed away somehow due to the unsafe and even just straight up toxic living conditions. They had a population crisis, with there not being enough new dragonets born to sustain the tribe. As a result, all surviving eggs were highly prioritized, even though there wouldn't be enough food or fresh air for them once they hatched. Dragonets were taught by everyone around them, as well as their parents, to remain secretive at all times. That way, the secrets of the Nightwings would never leave their island. Most fantasized about being able to fly free on missions the Queen needed, but were unable to go anywhere else on or near Pyria until they turned 10, which would be around our early 20s in human years. That's how much they wanted these secrets kept close. Families weren't very loving, instead valuing ego and pretend prestige above personality and genuineness. Dragonets resided in separate chambers from their parents and the other adults. Due to there not being a lot of room on the volcano, these dormitories were packed and prison-like. Back in Darkstalker's day, however, the Nightwings were a lot different. They actually had the wealth and power they flaunted, rather than it all being a facade. Families owned their own homes in places that would reflect their status. For example, being on a higher payroll resulted in you literally residing in the cliffs up by the palace in greatest academies. Egg nests were away from their houses, instead being placed in the peaks. This was likely in hopes of the best full moonlight shining on the newborns. That way they'd have a good chance of developing strong powers. Parents, primarily mothers, checked on their eggs, and created the nests to be fairly snug. It was the moms who always named their child once they hatched, and it's been said a dragonet's name may even be an actual factor or influence in their path. Back then, and even before, Nightwings lived nocturnally. Now it's time to talk about the Sandwings. These dragons had their own residences, usually either isolated or located in towns by oases. In the case of the former, parents, although there may just as often be only one, raise their dragonets by themselves. Schooling, hunting, and vital skills are taught from an early age. In the case of dragons growing up in some larger settlements, they're instructed on ways to be aware of their venomous tail barb in order to prevent any potential accidents, and what to do if something does occur. These skills are sometimes taught in a wingery, especially if the dragonet is from the palace. Sandwing families seem to be pretty rough as a whole, with there being many unhealthy dynamics posed in the related relationships we've seen so far in this tribe. However, that definitely doesn't speak for everyone, as there are caring parents and guardians who make a real effort to protect and look after their kids in such an ever-changing and harsh environment. Up next are the Icewings, who are known for their incredibly strict family situations. The overall hierarchy plays a huge role in the life of nearly all the dragons in the kingdom, especially any that reside on palace grounds. Royals are not typically affectionate, as they're forced and raised to adhere to very high standards of behavior. Parents, formerly wedded pairs, insist that their dragonets must have all their weaknesses exposed and highlighted in order to be strong, rather than appreciating their kids and aiding them in a healthy way. Higher-ranking Icewings believe that dragonets will work harder if others are disappointed in them, which is just a terrible mindset. Children are often warriors from the start, even outside of times of great conflict. In the palace, affectionate gestures like hugs are pretty much prohibited socially. However, this doesn't apply to all Icewings. Those growing up in the many villages outside of the castle tend to have more of a relaxed existence, without the pressure to conform or be part of the circle system. Dragonets there dream of being traveling bards or helpers, rather than landing a stiff role with the queen. Since Snowfall changed the way the tribe operates in its highest levels, it is unknown how exactly the Ice Wings will go moving forward. But it's highly likely the next generations are going to be far more peaceful and less demanding than their unhappy ancestors. Now comes time for the Skywings, who have their own way of raising dragonets. Majority of the children grow up in the Wingery, such as one located on the Queen's castle grounds. They're taught important information and given the chance to understand Skywing culture firsthand. Flight is very important to these dragons of the clouds, and is something in which the mastery of is focused on early. The best way to describe the Skywing family structure is very loose. While some dragons seek partners, others don't. Both results are equally as common, and not everybody is searching for romance. Those who don't want to be part of a traditional family may just offer to help lay eggs for the queen as part of a breeding program, and be sorted into temporary pairs. Those who do choose something a bit more formal will usually opt for a wedding, which is composed of a fairly quiet ceremony between two dragons. They fly above the clouds and then legally register their arrangement in an ancient record scroll. During the time of Scarlet, weddings of important dragons often involved fights in the arena, likely as a form of spectacle for the two newlyweds to behold or maybe even partake in. It's entirely normal for a Skywing to remain single throughout their life, and there are seemingly no set expectations or pressure for eggs. However, hatched dragonets are extremely judged. Throughout history, the Skywings have thrown their own eggs off cliffs if the hatchling inside is an animus, fire scales, or anything else they deem unfit or too dangerous to live. That wraps it up for Pyria, but there's still a whole other continent to explore. We'll start with the Silkwings. These dragons have gone through many changes across their history, so I'll begin with discussing their earliest days, the pre-Tree Wars era. Back at this time, Silkwings had a very free existence. While there were schools dragons got placed into, it was a very loose system. Upon emerging from their cocoon, they could take time off to explore parts of the world and decide on their future. Even when it came to royalty, there was no bloodshed. Rather, the queen selected one of her daughters to rule. She would then meet with the other two tribes if any issues arose. But when Wasp's harsh and controlling claws caught hold of the Pantolan tribes, everything changed. The Silkwings ultimately ended up becoming slaves for the Hivewings, which changed their entire system of life, beyond even just families and dragonet rearing, although that's what we'll focus on here. These dragonets were forced into schools designed to make them feel inferior, and faced much harsher punishment than Hivewings. Rather than have an open chance at a future again, Silkwings were trapped with limited options for life. Even their jobs were chosen for them by their oppressors, who forced them into positions that were physically demanding and even dangerous. Dragonets could also be placed into labor if there was additional need. Instead of being able to fall in love or have the choice not to, Silkwings were placed into mandatory pairs. They could not divorce unless given special permission by the queen or her sisters. But why would they care if two dragonets didn't love each other? They had to get the work done anyways. Arranged marriages were set up following a Silkwing's metamorphosis, and remained a rushed process. To keep a very close eye on dragonets, everyone from the tribe was branded with their initials alongside their parents'. All dragons were required to live in structures connected by webs, which were very dangerous to cross, and not lavish like the Hivewings had at all. Thankfully, with the creation of the Leaf Silk Kingdom, this tribe is going to have a far more peaceful and free existence for the indefinite future. One I hope is very permanent. The Hivewings have also changed a lot as well. In fact, they used to make their homes in the caves and cliffs of Pantala. Though these dragons are incredibly wealthy, being first class citizens, they were still controlled by Wasp. Children had to specialize in a particular career field from very early on in life, and there was a lot of pressure surrounding university and futures. It was usually the parents who decided what their dragonet was to focus on and spend their life doing, typically by what was the most profitable or prestigious. Even the Hivewings needed permission to divorce, although I'm sure it was definitely easier for them to get one over the Silkwings, and I think that pretty much goes for everything. Still, the process was incredibly difficult on purpose. The Queen desired that control in every aspect of her citizens' lives. Hiving marriages are seemingly by choice, unlike how their servants do not get to pick their partners. Nearly every family straight up owned Silkwings, forcing them to do labor. Last up comes the Leafwings, who are incredibly separate from the other tribes on the continents. Before the Tree Wars, these jungle dragons attended academies and lived lives of exploration, celebration, and assumed freedom. Eventually, after Wasp tried to burn their homes, they split into two sub-tribes, the Poison Wings and the Sapwings. The former focused on bloodthirsty revenge, wanting to strike against the Hivewings as soon as possible and reclaim what was theirs to protect and their people. The Sapwings, on the other hand, opted to stay low until Wasp's death. They were more peaceful and open about the existence of the other half of the tribe. Poison Wings sometimes had arranged marriages, especially in cases of needing more powerful Leafspeak dragonets to be born into the tribe. However, as shown with Sundew, you could ultimately fight this decision. Regardless of subtribe, all dragonets lived with their families until they turned 5, before they ended up going off to create their own nest, which is crazy to me because those are still children. Wow, that is a lot of different family structures, systems, and societies. No one tribe is the same, and I think it's fascinating that way. I can't wait to view how everything evolves as the kingdoms are no longer at war with one another. There's bound to be a lot more freedom and peace for everyone. What do you guys think about this video? Which tribe's way of going about parenting in early life is the most interesting to you? Which would you never want to be a part of? Let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.